So when I wrap my machine, that is not there. So when I wrap my machine, I like to use the Sensi wrap, which is just essentially like a different form of athletic tape. So more sterilized, was supposed to be more sterilized, which RJ made a good point that most like sport tape, depending on where you buy this type of shit from, it's not going to be fully sterilized because it's not meant for that. But if you buy from like a medical supply or like the actual tattoo websites under medical, most of the time they will be wrapped up and it will have the actual typically there's like a stamp. Yeah, that says it's like sterilized. All right, let me see. I'm not liking the focus on this. I want to make sure this is typically what I do is I'm going to wrap it once around here. I'll line it right up with the top. But I don't want to interfere with that ring where the needle goes in, or that can kind of cause a jam with the cartridge trying to pull it in and out. So I'll leave that ring completely open. Then I'll wrap that around. And I'll always wrap with gloves on, but since I am doing fake skin, I'm not going to worry about the whole glove aspect. That's what I'll do. And then I don't have any fucking towels. I use the blue shop towels. So like the Scott's like mechanics towels, I use these. This is what I choose to use. They don't leave any sort of residue from the paper towels. How when you use Bounty or any sort of white cheap paper towel, you'll notice you have like little white flakes on your tattoo. It's almost like the shit ripped on the skin. It's like leaving like a trail essentially. Like it's fraying off onto the skin. I don't like using those. These are smoother for the skin. These are way more smooth than any other towel. What I do is I take two of them and I fold them in on themselves like so. And then I'll fold this in half like so. And then I'll fold this into thirds. Fold that there. I'll fold it right back on itself right there. Now this is my grip. I've switched my grip up a lot. I have hand issues. So with my hand issues, I noticed that the bigger grip that I used to use was hurting my hands more because I basically took more strength to grip around that larger grip. So I essentially made it smaller. So instead of using two towels like I do now, I was using three. And I would fold those on themselves. Now all I do is I wrap it. And I always wrap it against the table. I used to wrap it like holding it up and just using my hands. But the amount of times I've dropped the paper towel or I almost dropped my machine, it's a lot safer and it's way more consistent regarding pressing. So that's what it'll look like once it's wrapped. I keep it even with the top, majority even with the top. And then once this is here, I'm taking the Sensi wrap again, pinching it down, wrapping this all around. So now, once this catches, I'll go around. Anything blue, I'm trying to cover. I want to make sure the whole top is wrapped. And the way I wrap this specifically, right here is I'll put it on the edge right there, how it comes across. I'll pinch it. I'll put my thumb down right where it hits the edge where I want it. And then I'll turn it, match that right there. Now I'll toss my thumb on this, do the same thing here, there, and just kind of rinse and repeat the whole process until that whole opening is covered. All right. Now this is going to sound funny, but there is an artist called Victoria Lee. She does something different for sanitation, right? I used to put barrier film over the top here to cover up the hole, and then I'd poke a hole. Then I'd poke a hole and put the needle in. I did it with the barrier film. I did it with plastic wrap. I started with plastic wrap, then moved to barrier film, poking the hole. It didn't really produce anything more sanitary for me specifically. I've even cut fingers off of gloves to wrap over top. It just limits the machine more for me. But what I did see somebody do, Victoria Lee, she's a phenomenal color artist. What she has done, she actually uses unlubricated condoms and wraps her machine. She'll put the head of the condom right here, and because it has that little piece, it fits right in there perfectly, and it actually doesn't alter the function of the machine, and she just ties a knot on the back. Realistically, that is the most sanitary option. It doesn't impede on the actual needle movement. It doesn't impede on the plunger for the cartridge to fit in because that fits right in there, and it wraps the whole machine perfectly. You can still twist this. You can still adjust needle hang. You can still touch everything else. Realistically, that's the cleanest option. So I'm going to look into that, and I'm actually going to start using that and see how it works.
Wait, so she doesn't poke a hole?
No, she just leaves the head of the condom and inverts it and pushes it in. So there's no hole. So there's a full barrier from the machine to the needle. So there's no way, unless that condom breaks, which it fucking shouldn't, There's no way that anything can get in. So as funny as it sounds, using a condom to actually protect the machine, it does make the most sense, which I was very skeptical seeing it the first time around. It makes sense. I just don't know what brand I'm going to use, and I don't know who the fuck I'm going to go through to actually get the condom. So once I start doing that, I'm going to use it, review it, and then I'm going to bring it up to you guys and let you know where I get it from manufacturer and keeping it as sanitary as humanly possible. But then what I'll do, this is the barrier film. I'm sure you've all seen barrier film. Hopefully you have. It comes in a big ass roll, essentially what dentists use, and I overlap it. So you see how it's overlapped right there where the gold is or where the bronze is right here. That's what you want. All right. I'm going to wrap it. Once it's wrapped, I pinch it right there. What I like to do, I'll take that off. And where these meet, I go in, I pinch this down so it's covering that as well. And now that's covered. Still very real that ink can get in here and go down, which is why you clean your machine after every fucking tattoo as thoroughly as humanly possible. But this just prevents it to a certain extent. I don't know why it's not focusing. That just fulfills it to a certain extent. And now, and then I just kind of like wrap off the top like that. All right. So I'm going to show you how I hold the machine. I'm going to mainly use black. I'll probably run a black. I'll probably run like a 40 to kind of show the fur and the shading as well. And then let me look around with this. Yeah. All right. Show you all everything. Say again?
Do they break off in pieces of 4 every time?
Yeah, always 4. They make singles you can click together and connect, mainly for color, but it's always like a 4 set with these. There we go. So I'm gonna run black. That one. And I'm gonna run a 20% or 40% on the other one.
Does your pen have synthetic grease that goes inside of it?
Yeah.
How often do you?
Whenever the machine starts to kind of get louder, if I'm being honest with you, whenever I hear it, that's when I choose to go about and change it. I
Okay.
will also, because I really deep clean my machine when I'm done. Like I'll wipe everything out. What I'll do in here, you can see, I did a tattoo with this last night, so you could see right there, majority clean. You can't see any grease,
Yeah.
right? So this is what I do. And I do this every session before I start tattooing. All right. After I start tattooing, I don't do this. Once the needle touches skin, I don't do this. But beforehand, what I will do is I'm just going to grab some needles so I can kind of work with you guys. What liner do you guys use most often? Do you guys most often use fine line? Like anywhere from like a bug pin 3 to a 5?
Yeah. For me, I
Yes.
typically use 3 to 5.
Yeah.
All right. So then I'm going to run a 3. So I'm going to show you guys how I pull with the 3.
My go-to right now is a 063.
Yeah, same shit. I use 06 and 08 threes typically. So that's perfect. I found myself over the years using less and less standard needles, and I only really run bug pin now. So like for instance, this one is an 08. How the fuck? I don't know why this isn't focusing. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me. So this one's an 08, 03. Still not focusing. Right there. So 0.25 weight gauge.
I'm sorry, could you explain that? I don't I don't really understand like bug pin and like all that.
Absolutely. So I'll show you. I got 2 different examples of boxes. So this is kind of how standard and bug pin works, right? So a standard is any sort of box that says like 12. Oh man, this camera is not doing me justice today. It's anything that says kind of like 12, right? So you see how
Those
it's
are the ones I have.
say again?
I said those are the ones that I have, the ones that say 12.
12. Cool. Cool. So this is 12, 13, right? So I'll explain all this. And is this inverted for you guys? So this is like almost backwards.
No, it's not.
All right, facts. So this says 12, 13, right? So the 12 in the beginning, I'm going to mark this up for you. So the 12 in the beginning, this right here is the gauge. So this directly correlates to that. All right. So this is the gauge, right? So these two things are the same number, just shown differently. All right. So a 12 means 0.35 gauge, and the gauge is the thickness of the needle. All right. That makes sense, Ricardo?
Yeah.
Perfect. So the 12, this is referring to the thickness. All right. This right here, the 13, is the amount of needles that are in the needle. All right.
Okay.
The long taper is the point from where the needle starts tapering down into the point. So if this is a needle, from here to here is the gauge. From here to here is the taper. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the long taper, right? So that's just a longer distance from tip to the beginning of the taper down. And it's a curved mag. So the curved mag, there's needles, and the pattern it's kind of making is more like a semicircle. So the needles are going to form that shape.
Mm.
All right. So this is a
All right.
standard. 12 is a standard. All right. Once you get into kind of like more shading like realism and stuff like that, smooth grays, majority of people move down to a 10 or an 08. I say stick with the 10 when you're going with curved mags or any sort of shading. Anything regarding line work, you can go from 10 to an 08 to an 06. But with shading, when you go further down to like 08s and 06s, the needle has a really hard time grabbing the ink. So I tend to stay away from that. It does more damage to the skin than it does actually put the ink into the skin, is what I've noticed. The holes are too small to actually hold the ink. So 10 is directly correlated to a 30 gauge. As you saw in the last one, it was a 3.5 gauge. This is a 30 gauge. So the gauge of the needle, the thickness of the needle, is slightly smaller on a 10.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of makes sense. So the 10
Yeah.
from a 10 down is a bug pin. So like 10 is bug pin, 08 is a super bug pin, and an 06 is like a fucking super bug pin. Like they're all supers. But this is what most people refer to when they talk bug pin is a 10, all right? Or a 30 gauge. And I'll show you the difference why I'm saying the 30 gauge and the 10 are so important. When you deal with quadrant, typically when you deal with quadrant, when you're shopping for them, the 10 isn't necessarily an option. It typically only shows 30, 13. So most people that understand the 10, they don't understand the direct correlation to a 30 gauge. So a 10 is a 30, an 08 is a 0.25. Whenever you go down by 2, like going from 12 to 10 to 8, you're going down by 5 with the other one. So 12 is a 3.5, 10 is a 30, 08 is a 2.5. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you quadrant, this is the grouping of the needles. So this is the pattern that the needles are in. All right. So these are staggered. But right here, I don't know if you can kind of see that, if it's going to focus on it or not. Right there, you see that curve that it has?
Mm-hmm.
That right there is showing the actual shape that the needles are when you look at the actual needle. And I'll show you with the one that I'm going to pull out. Because I only use curved mags. I don't use any flat mags.
Let's say all my needles are what I use for linings 1205 or 1207.
Yeah, right. If it doesn't wipe away first. So this one is, see if I can get to focus right there. So this one is a 25. Oh, I'm not using this. Fuck this then. I literally just said I don't use 25s and I pull out the only 25 in my fucking drawer. That's a 30. I'm using that. All right. So I'll use this. All right. All right. So you see how that says 30 and then the 17. So
Yeah.
30, it's a 10. So this is a bug pin. All right. 17 are the amount of needles that there are. SE is soft edge. And this is a long taper. All right. So the LT is long taper. And then SEM. I don't necessarily know exactly what the M is, but I know SE is soft edge. Right. And all these have lot numbers and expiration dates. So if you ever have a problem with your needle, call the people you bought them from because there can be a problem with the actual batch. Like with gloves, I bought like 50 boxes of gloves once, and there was a problem with the whole batch. They had to resend the whole shit. So this is just as important, just not on the day-to-day use. So this is what it is. This is a curve mag. So you can see on the curve mag that you have that curve in the cartridge head. You see how that's round and not flat?
Mhm.
All right. Once you see the needles too, same thing. Needles are curved, not flat. So that's what a curve mag is. All right. So with this grouping, that's all 17 needles lined up, one on top of each other. So it's stacked. See that separation? Slight, but it's there. Right. So that's a curve mag. That's how that's explained. Now, if you see something like this on the cartridge right there, that's always the grouping in the needle. This is a round liner. All right. So around shader, all the needles, if you have 5, they're all going to be open like this, right? Around liner, they're all grouped together like that. And then a shader, it's all flat. All right. So a shader you can use for, or a curve mag, any sort of mag you can use for shading, any sort of pendulum shading is what I use them for.